You couldn't lie straight in bed, Drummond.
I don't have to take that from you.
You want to do something about it? Come outside and I'll knock your bloody head off.
Control yourself, Mr. Hancock, or you'll find yourself in serious trouble. You find that amusing?
Well, I was just wondering how much more serious things could be.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on Breaker Morant 1980. Breaker Morant 1980 was one of many very good or funny Australian films that were hitting the US market in the 1980s. There was something good going on there at the time, and we could use some more of it. Some of these films are Gallipoli 1981, Mad Max 2 1981, The Man from Snowy River, Fortress 1985, Crocodile Dundee 1986, For Love Alone 1986, The Light Horseman 1987, The Year My Voice Broke 1987, and Dead Calm 1989. I especially like Breaker Morant 1980 because it's a military trial movie. I have a list of the 10 greatest military trial movies of all times on the site. The events depicted in this movie took place during the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902. It is based on the actual events detailed in Scapegoats of the Empire 1907, authored by George R. Whitten. This movie has been compared favorably with The Caine Mutiny 1954, 12 Angry Men 1957, that a lot of the action was filmed in a single room, Paths of Glory 1957, and Judgment at Nuremberg 1961. This movie was nominated for a Best Writing Screenplay based on material from Another Medium Oscar. The film is rated 7.9 on IMDb. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has 100% on the tomato meter and 91% audience score. That's what I'm talking about. New York Times film critic Janet Maslin said in a December 22, 1980 review, quote, "The action is confined almost exclusively to a trial, the outcome of which is a fait accompli. The mode of it recalls military dramas of the 1950s, like Terence Rattigan's Ross. In this case, the gears move almost automatically. There's nothing unexpected here, but neither are there omissions of anything an audience might anticipate. As based on Kenneth Ross' play, Breaker Morant is a shapely and orderly kind of drama. Its greatest strength is that it delivers what it promises." Unquote. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Jack Thompson was pretty amazing as the backwoods lawyer, Major J.F. Thomas. Thompson was first covered in the fantastic Australian film The Man from Snowy River, 1982. Edward Woodward played the title character Harry Breaker Morant. Woodward was born in England in 1930. He attended Commerce College before training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He became a professional stage actor in 1946. His first film was Where There's a Will, 1955. He continued to act on stage and work in movies. In 1963, he made his Broadway debut. Woodward had an uncredited role in Beckett, 1964, and was in Young Winston, 1972, a movie that in part dramatizes Winston Churchill's work as a correspondent during the Second Boer War. Woodward was in the British television series Callan, 1967-72, as a burnout spy. He reprised this role in a few films. Woodward became well known after he appeared in The Wicker Man, 1973. Of course, Breaker Morant 1980 made him an international star. Woodward was in the terrorist suspense film The Final Option, 1982. Woodward was in an American television series, The Equalizer, 1985-89. In this series, he had a particular set of skills and went around setting wrong things to right. I enjoyed the show, but my father always thought Woodward's chin was too weak for the role. Woodward's later film work included Suspicious Circumstances 1991, Deadly Advice 1994, Hot Fuzz 2007, and A Congregation of Ghosts 2009. Woodward died that same year. Brian Brown was the rough and tumble Lieutenant Peter Hancock. Brown was born in Australia in 1947. He worked as an insurance salesman until beginning theater work. Brown began working in film in 1975. He received a lot of attention following The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith 1978. Some of Brown's better-known film roles are Breaker Morant 1980, FX 1986, which is one of Brown's most significant roles, Gorillas in the Mist 1988, Cocktail 1988, which Brian the Dog loves, Two Hands 1999, and Gods of Egypt 2016. He has worked extensively in television miniseries including Against the Wind 1978, A Town Like Alice 1981, The Thornbirds 1983, and The Shirley 1987. Brown is married to Australian actress Rachel Ward and is still living. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The movie begins with a crawl explaining that the British Empire was at war with the Boers, who were primarily Dutch. The Boers were using asymmetric warfare, and the British Army was trying to deal with their hit-and-run tactics. A British Army band is playing in the town center of Petersburg in 1901. A military camp is located in the town, complete with a prison. A military court of inquiry is completing a hearing for 3 Australian soldiers. As the soldiers make their final statement, Harry Breaker Morant, Edward Woodward, says he is English and engaged to his former superior's sister. He tells of how after a distinguished combat record, he joined a new unit, the Bushveld Carbineers. He takes full responsibility for what happened, but he says he was following orders. He also says he was deeply disturbed by what happened to Captain Simon Hunt, Terence Donovan, who was to be his future brother-in-law. The events are told in flashback. Captain Hunt leads a group of Bushveld Carbineers and their Boer translator, Christian Botten, Russell Kiefel, on a night raid of a suspected Boer hideout. Botten warns the captain, but after leaving Sergeant Major Drummond, Ray Meager, and a few men behind, the captain and the other men advance on the house. When they are in the kill zone, they are attacked by a large contingent of Boer fighters. Captain Hunt is wounded, but calls for a retreat. Sergeant Major Drummond calls for a retreat, leaving the wounded Captain Hunt on the field. Botten asks the Sergeant Major if he will attack to save Captain Hunt, but the Sergeant Major refuses. Sometime after sunrise, the attack patrol returns to the field camp. Lieutenant George Whitten, Lewis Fitzgerald, and Lieutenant Peter Hancock, Brian Brown, see that the patrol has been hit. Hancock rides out to meet them. Breaker finds out that Hunt has been shot along with 5 troopers. He orders a patrol to prepare to depart. Hancock accuses Botten of betraying Hunt. Breaker chews out the intelligence officer, Captain Alfred Taylor, John Waters. Not that one. Captain Taylor says to avenge Captain Hunt. Returning to the current timeline, the 3 prisoners, Breaker, Hancock, and Whitten, are told they will receive a military court-martial and will be held in prison. At Army headquarters, Prosecutor Major Charles Bolton, Rod Mulliner, is meeting with Colonel Ian Hamilton, Vincent Ball, and Lord Kitchener, Alan Cassell. Bolton is familiar with the Bushveld Carbineers, as Lord Kitchener created the unit himself.
We've just arrested 3 of them for shooting Boer prisoners and a German missionary.
I've received Bolton's telegraph message from Whitehall. The German government has lodged a serious protest about the missionary in particular.
The 3 prisoners are charged with executing Boer prisoners and killing a missionary. The German government has protested the killings. Bolton is told that the German Kaiser is looking for an excuse to help the Boers and get a hold of South Africa's mineral wealth. No historical evidence of German interest has been uncovered. Bolton is told that the evidence is overwhelming. Breaker, Hancock, and Whitten are getting dressed and talking about why they joined the fighting. Whitten is the most naive and patriotic of the 3. Australian Major J.F. Thomas, Jack Thompson, arrives and says he has been assigned to the defense. Thomas has only received the preliminary report the day before, and the next day will be the trial. Thomas has never handled any type of trial.
As a matter of interest, how many courts-martial have you done?
None.
None. Jesus, they're playing the double-headed penny, aren't they?
Would you rather conduct your own defense?
But you have handled a lot of court cases back home, sir.
No. As a country town solicitor, I handled land conveyancing and wills.
Wills might come in handy.
He tells the 3 prisoners that they are facing murder charges. That night, Thomas joins the other officers and their wives for dinner. The British think the Australians are all savages. Thomas explains that the name Breaker comes from being a wild horse tamer. A Boer singer entertains the diners. In the morning, Thomas and the three prisoners are taken to a room for the court-martial. Breaker, Hancock, and Whitten don't know who filed the charges against them. As soon as the trial starts, Thomas begins making motions. The officer in charge denies all of his motions. The prisoners are charged with the murder of 7 Boers. Breaker and Hancock are also charged with the murder of the missionary. Bolton calls Captain Robertson, Rob Steele, as his first witness. Robertson says the Australians were very undisciplined and generally bad soldiers. He says Hancock placed prisoners in open wagons in front of trains. On cross-examination, Thomas draws out that the Bushveld Carbineers were established to fight commandos, which is a Boer word.
We had to fight behind the lines against the Boer commandos.
Commandos. That's a new word. It's a Boer word, isn't it? What does it mean?
The commandos had to live off the land, use hit-and-run tactics, surprise attacks, that sort of thing. The Boers did it, so it was the only way we could fight back.
He also establishes that placing prisoners in wagons stopped the train attacks. When Robinson was in charge, only 29 prisoners made it to headquarters. Thomas asked if there was a policy of shooting Boer prisoners. Sergeant Major Drummond, who abandoned Captain Hunt, is called to tell of Breaker's revenge patrol. He tells that they found the mutilated body of Hunt. They followed the trail for 2 more days. The Bushveld Carbineers attacked the camp and killed a lot of Boers. They find 1 Boer hiding in a wagon who is wearing Captain Hunt's uniform jacket. Breaker orders the man executed. Sergeant Major Drummond says that he tried to stop the execution. The men get ready for the firing squad, and Botten joins them. Sergeant Major Drummond, on testimony, makes himself the good guy. Thomas asks about an order from Lord Kitchener about executing Boers wearing khaki. Drummond is forced to admit that things got better when Breaker and Hancock arrived.
You may stand down, Mr. Drummond.
You couldn't lie straight in bed, Drummond.
I don't have to take that from you.
You want to do something about it? Come outside and I'll knock your bloody head off.
Control yourself, Mr. Hancock, or you'll find yourself in serious trouble. You find that amusing?
Well, I was just wondering how much more serious things could be.
Botten is called to testify. Botten makes himself seem innocent. He denies that he volunteered to shoot the prisoner. Bolton questions Breaker about the death of Hunt. Breaker loses his cool and says that he killed the men under Rule 303, or 303 caliber. Thomas meets with the 3 prisoners that night. He admonishes Breaker and Hancock for speaking out. He says he will call witnesses in the morning. Hancock says most of the witnesses have been sent to India to fight. The next day, in broad daylight, Botten is shot down in the central part of town. Thomas calls Captain Taylor to the stand. Taylor says Breaker was a good soldier, but he was rash. Taylor says the killing of prisoners was standard practice. Thomas says that once Breaker brought in 6 prisoners and Hunt ordered them executed. Hunt said the killing order came from Lord Kitchener. The court rules that this information is irrelevant. Taylor confirms that Boers had been shot for wearing khaki. Prosecution introduces that Taylor is pending trial for murdering prisoners. The next night, Whitten dreams about his family honor. Hancock thinks about the wife and child he left behind. Breaker dreams of his time in England with his fiancée and the Hunt family. In the morning, the military camp is attacked while the guard is being distracted by a Boer woman. The Boer commandos do a lot of damage as the sleeping English awake and try to defend themselves. Breaker, Hancock, and Whitten are given rifles. They fight against the attack bravely. Breaker and Hancock fire a machine gun, weakening the attack. The remaining Boers flee. In court, Thomas reads precedents from the Duke of Wellington that says prisoners who redeem themselves in combat should be pardoned. The ruling officer rejects his plea. In flashback, Breaker, Hancock, Taylor, and some others are sitting in the field camp. They get word that a group of Boers are coming in with white flags. The prisoners are put in a barbed wire compound. Breaker says that they are part of the group that killed Hunt. Taylor says to kill them. Whitten is against the killing, but Hancock says he is just following orders. A German missionary, Reverend Daniel Hess, Bruno Nies, rides his buggy into camp. Breaker tells Hess not to talk to the prisoners. Breaker sees Hess talking to the prisoners. Breaker is unhappy about the conversation. After Hess leaves for Boer country, the prisoners are taken out to be executed. One of the prisoners attacks Whitten. Whitten has to shoot the man to save his own life. The others are killed by firing squad. Back in court, Thomas requests that Lord Kitchener be brought to testify. Thomas tells about the things he has done under orders. The officer in charge denies the request, but Thomas shows that any witness can be called. Bolton joins Thomas for an evening conversation. Bolton says that the Australian government wants the men convicted. He then asks Thomas to withdraw the request for Kitchener. Thomas refuses. In a conversation, Colonel Hamilton and Lord Kitchener reveal that they are working with Taylor on getting the conviction.
Taylor, yes, Taylor, assured you the case against the Australians was overwhelming. Now he seems to spend most of his time giving evidence on their behalf.
Certain proprieties have to be observed, sir, and Taylor fought with the Morant. It creates a bond. I don't think he's the problem. Major Thomas is putting up an unexpectedly good defense. Two of the court members are showing some sympathy for the Australians.
I dare say it's too late to transfer them to India.
Kitchener admits that he has been transferring friendly witnesses to India. He says the 3 Australians must be sacrificed in the name of peace. Kitchener sends Hamilton to testify and lie about the order. Thomas will not give up, and he says Hunt told Baker, and so Baker was only following orders. You know how that worked out for the Nazis at Nuremberg. On a Sunday, the 3 men are hanging around the prison. Thomas shows up. The only issue left is the killing of the missionary Hess. Hancock refuses to change his story that he went hunting. On the next trial day, Thomas is given some information from a guard. Corporal Sharp, Chris Haywood, was on guard when Hess left. He tells that about a half hour later, Hancock spoke to Breaker and then left the camp. It is clear that Bolton has prepped this witness. Thomas asks about Sharp being dismissed from the Bushveld Carbineers after Hancock caught him stealing. Thomas asks Sharp about bragging in bars about wanting to help with the execution of Hancock. Breaker is questioned about why he wanted Hess to stay away from the prisoners. Breaker says it was for security. Hancock is called to testify next. Thomas gets an adjournment until the next day. Thomas works with Hancock on the true story. Hancock says he met and slept with 2 different Boer women, both of whom had husbands in the Boer military. In flashback, Hancock is seen being very welcomed by the 2 women. Thomas submits written statements from the women.
I went visiting.
Visiting?
Visiting? Who could you possibly have visited? Well, I went to the farms owned by the Shields and the Vandenbergs.
Why? Who was at these farms?
Well, nobody. Well, only the ladies, sir.
And they received you into their homes alone?
Well, I was quite well known to them.
You mean to tell me you were on intimate terms with 2 Boer ladies?
Yeah, well, you could put it that way.
Back in the prison, Hancock admits that he killed Hess before seeing the ladies.
Who do you think did kill the missionary?
Me.
What about your lady friends?
That was later.
Does Major Thomas know?
No. And he's not going to.
Hancock and Breaker had agreed to keep this information about the murder from Thomas. In flashback, it is revealed that Breaker thinks Hess is the one that led Hunt to the ambush. In the courtroom, Thomas gives a stunning summation.
Lord Kitchener himself recognized the unorthodox nature of this warfare when he formed a special squad to deal with it. The Bushveld Carbineers.
He says Whitten should not have been charged. Thomas says the Boer commandos are outlaws. He says the officers are in no position to judge the men unless they have had the same experiences as the accused. That night, the 3 prisoners get drunk with some contraband whiskey they obtained. Breaker quotes Byron and Hancock gives bawdy poems. Thomas and Taylor come in with champagne and tell that they have been acquitted for the Hess killing. Taylor tells Breaker that he should not count on an acquittal. He offers to help Breaker escape. Breaker refuses to run. The men are taken one by one for sentencing. Whitten is taken first. He has been convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Lord Kitchener has commuted his sentence to life. Breaker is taken next and found guilty. He is sentenced to death. Finally, Hancock is taken in and gets the same sentence as Breaker. Whitten is shocked by the verdict for the other men. Thomas does everything he can to save the men from execution, but he cannot get to Kitchener. Although 2 of the officers voted for mercy, the head officer overruled them. Colonel Hamilton says there will soon be a peace conference. At the prison, carpenters are building coffins for the 2 condemned men. Hancock writes a tearful letter to his wife. Breaker writes a few letters and a poem. One stanza states, "If you encounter any Boers, you must not loot 'em, and if you wish to leave these shores, for pity's sakes don't shoot 'em." Whitten is taken away as Breaker screams that they are scapegoats of the bloody empire.
Why did they do it to us, Harry? Why?
They have to apologize for their damn war, George. They're trying to end it now, so they need scapegoats.
Harry!
They're scapegoats of the bloody empire!
Thomas comes to see Breaker. Breaker says he has had a good run and is finished as a horsebreaker because he has to drink before getting on one. Breaker and Hancock are taken outside. Breaker is offered a padre, but he says he is a pagan. Then Hancock is offered one as well. He asks Breaker what a pagan is. Breaker replies, someone who doesn't believe that a god is dispensing justice throughout the universe. Hancock says, I'm a pagan too.
You want the padre?
No, thank you. I'm a pagan.
And you?
What's a pagan?
Well, it's somebody who doesn't believe there's a divine being dispensing justice to mankind.
I'm a pagan too.
Breaker asks for an epitaph of Matthew 10:36. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. Hancock and Breaker are taken to the execution site. On the way they hold hands, showing their brotherhood. The hand-holding was improvised by the 2 actors, but was later found to have actually taken place. They are placed in chairs and refuse to take blindfolds. The firing squad, on order, shoots them. The 2 dead men are loaded into their coffins. A crawl on the screen shows that Thomas returned to his home in Australia and died in 1945. Taylor remained in Africa and received a good government job. Whitten served 3 years in an English prison. He returned to Australia where he wrote the book Scapegoats of the Empire in 1907. Whitten died in 1943. I'll be back directly with the conclusions and the world-famous short summary. Conclusions. Director Bruce Beresford has stated that the movie is often understood as the story of soldiers railroaded by the British Army in a sham trial. However, he stated in a phone interview documented on Wikipedia, quote, "But that's not what it's about at all. The film never pretended for a moment that they weren't guilty. It said they were guilty. But what was interesting about it was that it analyzed why men in the situation would behave as they had never behaved before in their life. It is the pressures that are put to bear on people in wartime. Look at all these things that happen in these countries committed by people who appear to be quite normal. That's what I was interested in examining. I always get amazed when people say to me that the film is about poor Australians who are framed by the Brits," unquote. Including Taylor, 3 other men were tried and found not guilty. Hoping to implicate higher-ranking targets, Breaker and Hancock were offered and refused a chance to turn King's evidence. Perhaps the most amazing thing about this movie is that you root for the condemned men regardless of the reality that they did commit the war crimes for which they were charged. It is very similar to how Coppola made Don Corleone sympathetic in The Godfather 1972, because killing and robbery were okay, but heroin was too much. World famous short summary: no good deed goes unpunished. I hope you enjoyed the show today. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show at classicmovierev.com. If you want to help out, you can leave a review where you listen to your podcast, or you can hit me up on social media. This podcast is free and independent and brought to you without commercials or ads. Beware the Moors.